So we're on the back side of the house with Peter Smith. He's a carpentry teacher at North Bennett Street. He was actually a preservation student at North Bennett Street. So he went from preservation and now he's teaching carpentry, which is an amazing program. I wanted to talk about North Bennett Street and the power of what we're teaching and what's going on here, how he's training a new generation. I really love what I learned at North Bennett Street because it taught me about craftsmanship and it taught me about what quality looks like and stuff like that. So to see a PC grad teaching carpentry, you guys are here on this historic project doing some great stuff. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so North Bennett definitely leans into old timber frames, old materials with preservation carpentry, but our 9-month full-time residential construction, modern construction leans into all things new. If it has a cord, if it's cordless, that's what we're all about. We're about advanced framing and stick framing and everything that goes into building your house today.
So you might ask, what's the difference between the carpentry program and the preservation carpentry program? 2 things, probably more than that, 3 things. Let's just say it's a bunch of things. The carpentry program is a 1-year program. It's a 8-9 month. You learn cabinetry, you learn drywall, you lay out a wall, you build a small building, you do framing, you do a bunch of different things, but it's all focused on building new. So you're not going to learn how to sharpen chisels or work with hand planes or timber frame a building, because the scope is for you to get out there and get a job as a carpenter in the world, and you're going to have an incredible base of information when you're done. The preservation program is a 2-year program, right? And you'll learn a lot of the same things, but instead of learning drywall, you learn about plaster. Instead of just framing, which you'll do, but you'll also learn timber framing. You'll spend more time working with hand planes, working and getting hand planes working again, right? Because the idea that museum quality historic preservation is if you are able to build and work on things that are from the 1800s, being able to use hand tools to do that. That job is basically a living lab, right? It's a practical place for people to go do real world building. That is a speculative build project. And so going out there, being efficient with your time, doing the stick framing with the carpentry, doing the timber frame and the timber frame restoration with the preservation, a learning place for them to hone their skills, get better at what they're doing. It's important.
If we look at this stick frame little bump out, a basement entrance here, we can be inspired by the old, right? So on this project, lean into the old, we simply had an old molding that was salvaged from an old house not too far from here. And this is a bed molding. And we said, well, let's take this, be inspired, and turn it into the crown molding that the carpentry students can go get a rough sawn piece of lumber, go to the shop and mill up the moldings. Now, the end result is straightforward, but there's lots of steps. It starts with giving the students a hand drawing of the finished product. You have a raking crown molding, and a horizontal level molding. When we make those profiles up, it's not one and the same. We can use old carpenters' builder's guides to help us draft those and teach those lessons. And in the end, you have 2 students.
Well, wait a minute. Let me back up. One of the books that Peter showed was Biddle's carpentry book. And this is a 1858 edition, okay? This book originally came out in 1805. Biddle died like in 1806 at the very young age of 32. These books are fantastic, and you don't have to find these old books like this. Dover Publication does reprints. There's a Menard Lefevre. Here's an Asher Benjamin. Asher Benjamin was the first American pattern book author. Owen Biddle was second, okay? So, and of course, the thing that's important about this is that you're learning about the early American heritage here, and you're learning about what carpenters knew, what carpenters were being taught, what they understood. If you summed up all my videos in one statement, looking to the past, trying to build better today, that's a perfect example. What he's pointing at may look really simple, may look like, oh yeah, you just got these moldings come together. But what you're looking at is actually very complicated. You kind of walk through that real quick, but there's a lot of complexity going on there with how that's built up. Sorry, now go back into explaining that.
Yeah, little details. So on this crown molding, you have a frieze and the crown. The one going up the pitch of the roof is the raking crown molding. It is an elongated profile, even though it might look the same compared to the one around the corner, which is the level or horizontal crown molding. We're leaning into the old, but making new.
mean, it needs to be noted that, every carpentry student that wants a job has a job when they finish your program.
Yep.
Right. You got people lining up to hire them.
Yep.
Which is awesome.
I get emails and phone calls every week from individuals and companies saying I'm looking for somebody.
Yeah.
I think that's like unheard of. Like the graduation rate from this school alone is crazy.
We
I know
have-
not every department.
Based
is
on
like
our
that, but-
based on our accreditation, we have to have 70% employment in the first 6 months of graduating.
yeah.
And I tell students when they're looking at a prospective or somebody who's in the program, if you want it, have the desire, the drive, and work hard at school, I can guarantee you a job someplace.
Yeah.
Doing largely what you want to be doing, whether
Right.
it's framing or you want to work for an interior trim company
Yeah.
or
See, but
something like that.
I would. I mean, you're being a little bit humble to call him an assistant carpenter because
Bell curve.
I think
Bell curve.
I think
The
that
high performing ones, I would call carpenters. Like
Yeah.
I would say that when they
I
get hired by a
understand.
company,
Okay, yeah,
they should
no,
be
I
a
appreciate
full-fledged
that.
carpenter.
because I think you probably know more than I do. Can you get that education anywhere else? I mean, is there another place training what you guys are training?
It's not that you can't get it someplace else. It's the amount of time it takes to get it.
Carpentry program in many ways is one of the more successful programs in North Bennett Street, mainly because when people get out, as Brock said on the podcast, they've got a job. If they don't, I'll hire them here in Texas, right? I mean, they're that qualified after that 1-year program. So case in point is the raking molding Peter and I were talking about. And a raking molding is basically a molding that comes down a gable end of a building and then ties into the fascia that comes around the side. That's a big deal. That's something that carpenters that have been on the job 5 or 10 years may not know and may not understand. So high level of skill that they're learning in that program. That North Bennett Street education for me, I've said this before, has really been a North Star for me as far as remembering craft, remembering beauty. When I got back to Texas, there was a lot I needed to learn. And so I spent the first 5 years, with a tool belt on, managing and working on projects, trying to do different things. And so I remember Hill County Courthouse, our first big project, I think it was $600,000 contract. And if I hadn't had just the grace of God, luck, finding wood at a less expensive price, I probably would have gone out of business. It probably would have been the end of Hull Homes, Hull Millwork. Gosh, that was 1996, 1995, something like that. That's year 3, year 2 in business, learning how to get better. But I'm really proud of that project. I'm really proud of the work that we did in there. I ran a lot of that millwork myself. I made a lot of that millwork myself. I installed a lot of that millwork myself. So it was a big, important job for us that really kind of started our career, especially in the preservation side, now to doing the 100-year window and things like that. That was the early start to that, but I had a lot of lessons to learn before then.
Another little detail that I like here is you notice that we have a profile, so we have a nice miter, plumb cut there. But on the frieze, there's no profile, so let's run it by. And the reason we run it by is, as we teach the students, the carpentry students, if this gap were to ever open up, you're not looking up into a toothy grin. You're looking up into moldings that relatively stay together nicely. So there's lots of little details, lots of little complexities.
And what you're getting into there is you are getting into how wood moves, right? You're getting into the joinery there that's going on. And I mean, already you're talking about looking into the past to learn how to build today.
Yep.
I mean, this is a great example of understanding wood grain, understanding how wood moves and contracts, understanding these different shapes. All from the past, like you said, but there's a lot there, and you might look at this and go, yeah, whatever, I can do that.
Right.
But it's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff that still plays into today. Like if you're using a duration polyash moldings, you can ask for a raking profile to match up with a horizontal profile. You can think about the movement, what happens after based on how you're installing. In fact, I would argue, and I could make a strong case why running this frieze board up and lapping it all the way over is easier than trying to cut the miter.
Yeah,
it's just easier.
Yeah.
If we go some more detail, you might be wondering why there's these 1/2 inch thick vertical strapping members. And that's to create an airspace behind. And if I can jump in it, this is gonna be half clapboards. And then you're gonna have a slate rail, somewhere like a chair rail. And below it, you're gonna have slate as like a wainscoting. So there's a lot going on this little bump out
Yeah.
that the carpentry students have been involved with the whole way through.
Well, something that, and we can get into that, why you're doing that, but air gap, right? Modern sheathing materials, when you try to slap material against it, you can trap water in there, so you've got to have this air gap. This is such a small little bump out that we don't really want a gutter on this thing. So the shingles are going to there, almost a splash guard, which is a really cool way of thinking about, you know, how to solve a building problem and in a traditional method.
Yes.
A lot of the build science things that I've been learning since I got out, and especially with Matt and Jake and Steve through the build show, is understanding the importance of an air gap, the importance of letting things dry out, okay? And that's what an air gap's for. So the wood gets wet, it can dry out. That's really the big problem. And that's why when people say they want things to breathe, really what you want is they want them to be able to dry out. And so they were putting air gaps in their wall assembly, right? You saw that there. Maybe the most important building trick that you should be practicing today is an air gap in your building system. You got a story stick. You want to show us how you laid this out. Let's go over there, check it out, because it's pretty awesome.
Okay, let's do that.
I think it's okay, right? I wasn't in love with it as much as they are, but this story stick, maybe it was just I didn't get good enough at it, so that it just didn't work as well for me. But I think too, just the way my brain works, being very visual, it helps more to draw it out and to draw those details than to have a stick that kind of has those measurements on it.
It forces you to understand the finished product.
Okay.
So if you don't understand the finished product, you can't work backwards for the very
Finished product, how it's going to look at the end.
how it's going to look at the end and where the boards will land. So literally on this little thin board has the story of how we're going to place the boards. So if we back up a little, the finished product is a bunch of these vertical boards nailed onto and screwed onto these horizontal spacers, strapping or furring strips. And then of course we have the vertical strips because we want air to get up behind there. Not only does it have to land and go around the top of the window trim, it has to make sure it works around the top of the window trim on the second story. So if you were to just start placing boards.
And what we're building is a vertical board and batten wall, okay?
Yes.
So you're gonna have these boards going across and then battens will cover that gap.
So you could royally screw up this wall if you didn't understand the finished aesthetic. And it's not just about the aesthetic, it's about do it right once. Yes, there's a lot of planning in it, but then you can move forward with efficiency.
We got board and batten, right? So there's your board and there's your batten, right? That's our finished look. This is a traditional period look. You know, this is a Victorian edition, right? And so
1870s,
yeah,
kind
so
of Gothic revival.
Okay, yeah.
You're gonna have a board and batten. Coming down, you're gonna have a water table with a kicker, all vented with air traveling up behind it, and then out the top.
And notice the water management here, right? That we are kicking water away from the building as best we can. That's what this piece is doing. And all of these other decisions that have been made behind the wall are made so that it can dry out, right? It doesn't get wet, water doesn't have an intrusion point, and this is really well thought out. That's our future, guys. That's the way we get better. That's the way we build better houses, is training, education, and encouraging, you know, people that they can go earn an amazing living, not get into any debt going to school, and build a career practicing a trade that you can practice for an entire life. And so it starts at a place like North Bennett Street. It's special. I got to think that there's opportunities for us to do that here and do that all over the country because we need it.